She left her family, but never expected him to rise without her. The hallway was too quiet. It was the kind of silence that crept beneath your skin, coiling tight around your chest, until even breathing felt like a betrayal. Michael stood frozen in the center of the living room, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound anchoring him to the moment. Sophia was in the doorway, half in, half out of the life they'd built together. The sunlight spilled through the open door behind her, gilding the handle of the expensive suitcase in her hand. Not her suitcase, not one they ever used on their family getaways to the mountains. No, this was new. A polished, monogrammed monstrosity her mother had sent 2 days ago, along with the sharp-tongued chauffeur who now waited impatiently downstairs in a black luxury sedan. Their apartment, once warm and filled with laughter and the soft gurgles of two newborns, now felt hollow. Even the walls, once covered with baby blue decals and framed photographs, seemed to shrink away from the moment. "I guess this is it," Michael said, his voice quiet, too quiet, like speaking any louder would make it real. Sophia turned slightly, her profile bathed in morning light. Her lips pressed into a flat line. No trace of emotion, but her knuckles were white where they gripped the suitcase. "You don't have to do this," he added, taking a step closer. He was trying, desperately trying, to find some thread, some unsevered piece of the woman he loved, still hiding inside the stranger in front of him. She looked up at him then. And for a moment, just one agonizing, flickering moment, he saw her. The real her. The woman who used to laugh at his dumb jokes, who cried the first time she heard their daughter's heartbeat on the monitor. The woman who once whispered in his ear, "You're my home." It was there. Then it was gone. Her face shifted, the flicker of doubt replaced by something steely and remote. Like she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head and now had to perform it to the letter. "My mother is right," she said. The words sounded foreign coming from her mouth, like they belonged to someone else. Someone colder. "This life isn't for me." Michael's heart cracked wide open. This life? Our life. The crib sat just a few feet away, where their newborn twins slept, oblivious. One of them stirred, letting out a quiet coo. Sophia's gaze flicked toward them, but didn't linger. "You mean the life we created together?" he asked, breathless. "The life where you're their mother, and I'm your—" "I was never supposed to be here," she cut in, her voice trembling for the first time. Michael's hands clenched at his sides. He didn't yell. He couldn't. All he could do was stare at the woman who once told him they'd grow old together, that their children would be raised with love, laughter, and the kind of stability neither of them had growing up. And now, here she was undoing everything with a single decision. "You loved me," he said, more to himself than to her. "You love them. You can't walk away from this. From us." Sophia flinched. It was small, but it was there. Her eyes glossed for a second, and her bottom lip quivered ever so slightly. She turned back toward the crib and took a tentative step. Michael thought she might reach out, might change her mind. But she stopped short. Her hand hovered above their son's tiny head, frozen in place. She didn't touch him. "I have to go," she whispered, as if even saying it out loud hurt. Michael's body tensed. The panic was rising, hot, fierce, relentless. He wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready for this? "Don't do this to them," he said, voice shaking. "Don't make me tell them their mother walked away." Sophia's shoulders stiffened. She didn't answer. "You said you'd never be like her," he continued, biting back tears. "You promised." "I need a future, Michael," she said without turning. "I need something stable. You're a good man. But love isn't enough. Not for me. Not anymore." There was a sharp honk from the street below. The driver. Sophia took a breath, closed her eyes for a second longer than necessary, and turned toward the door. Michael stepped forward. "If you walk out now," he said, his voice steady for the first time, "there's no coming back." Her hand trembled on the doorknob, and she pulled it open, sunlight pouring in. And just like that, she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and silence reclaimed the apartment. Michael stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the door, willing it to open again. It didn't. From the crib, a soft cry rose, first one, then the other. He turned slowly, legs numb, heart in ruins. The babies stirred, their faces scrunching as they woke. Michael crossed the room in 2 steps, scooping them into his arms, one at a time. Their warmth, their weight, they grounded him. They tethered him to this reality, however painful it was. "I've got you," he murmured into his daughter's ear, his voice thick with emotion. "I swear, I've got you." He sat down in the worn rocking chair, the twins nestled against his chest, their tiny bodies rising and falling in rhythm with his own. And in that moment, surrounded by everything she left behind, Michael knew. She might have walked away, but he was staying. Forever. The apartment was too quiet. Not the comforting silence of a peaceful home, but the kind that buzzed in your ears and pressed down on your chest. It was the kind of silence that lingered after a door slammed shut and took everything with it. Michael stood frozen in the dim light of the nursery, surrounded by the ghost of Sophia's last words. "This life isn't for me." He blinked once, then again. The silence was suddenly broken, not by the sound of the front door reopening like he hoped, but by a soft, gurgling whimper from the crib. Michael turned. One of the twins stirred, their tiny fists flexing, lips puckering into the start of a cry. His daughter, her face, still flushed from sleep, scrunched in protest. Michael moved on instinct, scooping her up in trembling arms. "It's okay, baby girl," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Daddy's here." She nestled into his chest with the blind trust only a newborn could offer. She didn't know anything had changed. She didn't know her mother had walked out. And maybe that was a blessing. Michael dropped into the old rocking chair they'd found at a secondhand store. It creaked under his weight, groaning in rhythm with the overwhelming ache in his chest. He clutched his daughter closer, feeling the steady thump of her heartbeat against his ribs, the softness of her cheek against his collarbone, the warmth of her tiny body against his own, as if reminding him, "You're not alone." But he was. At least, that's how it felt. The weight of the moment pressed in from every angle. Sophia was gone. Not for the night. Not for the weekend. Gone. And he was now the sole parent to 2 tiny, helpless lives who would grow up asking why. He shifted, carefully rocking her as his mind swirled in the chaos of fear, disbelief, and grief. Just hours ago, he had been imagining what their first year would be like. Diaper blowouts and giggles, milestones and sleepless nights together, as a family. Now, he didn't even know how he was going to get through tomorrow. Michael looked down at the crib, where his son still slept, completely unaware of the storm outside the safety of his sleep. He imagined him waking up to find no mother's face smiling down, no familiar scent of her perfume. Would he miss her? Would he even remember? The questions gnawed at him, but deeper than the pain, deeper than the exhaustion, something stirred. A feeling, a flame. Resolve. "I promise you," he whispered into the soft curls of his daughter's head. "I will never leave you. I will never make you feel like you're not enough. You will always have someone in your corner." She let out a sigh, the kind only babies can, pure, trusting, whole. "I may not have all the answers," he continued, voice steadier now. "I may not know how to do any of this, but I'll learn. I'll fail, and I'll stumble, and I'll cry when you're not looking. But I will never give up. I will never leave." The weight didn't lift, but it changed. It no longer felt like chains dragging him down. It felt like armor. Heavy, yes, but protective. Purposeful. He stayed there long after both twins had fallen asleep again, watching the slow rise and fall of their tiny chests, holding his breath with every moment that passed. Because if they could breathe, if they could keep going, then so could he. He gently placed his daughter back in her crib, tucked her in, and stood in the middle of the nursery, now a battlefield. Not chaos, but of choice. He had been abandoned, yes, but he hadn't been broken. Not fully. From now on, he was father and mother, provider and protector, leader and comforter. And he would carry that role, not as a burden, but as a badge, because this was his family now, and he wasn't going to let them fall. Not ever. The apartment had grown quiet again, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that pressed in on you, made you feel like even the air was watching. Michael stood by the sink, hands braced on the edge of the counter, eyes locked on the tiny pink baby sock lying next to a half-clean bottle. He didn't remember how it got there. Maybe he dropped it while juggling a midnight feeding. Maybe it had fallen from the laundry basket. Or maybe it was just a reminder that he was doing this alone now, and nothing was ever going to be neat or orderly again. Outside, the sun was already creeping up the buildings across the street, casting long shadows through the blinds. It was Monday. Again. Michael turned toward the couch where his twins, Emma and Eli, lay on a soft blanket, cooing and squirming. They had no idea how drastically life had changed. No idea that their mother had chosen absence over them. Their faces were soft, their eyes impossibly wide and innocent. To them, their dad was still their whole world. That knowledge should have given him strength. And in a way it did, but also terrified him. Because the world was not built for fathers like Michael. He found this out the hard way. The first time he went to a job interview after Sophia left, he wore his best blazer, ironed his shirt twice, and left his twins with an elderly neighbor who agreed to watch them for an hour. The moment the interviewer, a sharply dressed woman in her 40s, asked him to tell us a little about yourself, Michael did. He mentioned his qualifications, his previous role in logistics management, and then, almost as an afterthought, added that he was currently raising his 2 newborn twins alone. He never made it to the second round. The second time, he left that part out, focused on skills, leadership, problem solving. But still, when they asked about availability, flexibility, how he handled unexpected overtime, he hesitated. That was all it took. They smiled politely. We'll be in touch. They never were. What shocked him most wasn't the rejection. It was the suspicion behind it, as if being a father to infants meant he was unreliable, unstable, a risk. But what choice did he have? His children needed him. He couldn't leave them in daycare. There wasn't enough money for that, even if he wanted to. Hiring a nanny was laughable. His savings were bleeding fast, and every bottle of formula, every pack of diapers, every bill that landed in his mailbox felt like a fresh wound. Sometimes he caught his reflection in the microwave door at 3 a.m., hair disheveled, shirt stained with spit up, dark circles under his eyes, and he barely recognized the man staring back. He looked haunted, hollow. But the scariest part wasn't what he saw. It was that no one else saw it. The world didn't stop to applaud Michael for being a solo parent. It barely even acknowledged it. When a mother juggled 2 babies in a stroller, strangers rushed to help. Doors were held open, groceries carried, sympathy offered like candy. When Michael struggled with a diaper bag, car seat, and 1 baby screaming in each arm, people looked away, or worse, judged him. He once overheard a woman mutter to her friend in a grocery store aisle, "That's what happens when you leave men in charge." He pretended not to hear, but he did, every word. Still, he didn't break. He fell into a rhythm, a brutal, back-breaking rhythm. Mornings were chaos. Eli always woke up first, hungry and impatient. Emma followed minutes later, as if by instinct. He'd warm bottles while singing off-key lullabies, holding 1 baby with his left arm while mixing formula with his right. The apartment looked like a war zone. Laundry piled up, dishes in the sink, toys scattered like landmines. But his twins were fed, changed, loved. When they napped, he scoured job boards, wrote cover letters, sent out resumes into the digital abyss. Every ding of his phone gave him hope. Most were spam. Some were rejections. The rest? Silence. One afternoon, he had an interview at a mid-sized marketing firm. He wore the same blazer, a new tie, borrowed confidence. The manager, a middle-aged man with a Rolex and a practiced smile, seemed impressed until he asked Michael about availability. Michael tried honesty. My availability is wide open, he said, but I have two newborns at home. So while I'm committed, I'll need a bit of flexibility. The smile disappeared. Oh, you're doing this alone? Michael nodded, trying to read the expression that flickered across the man's face. It wasn't sympathy. Well, we do need someone who can put in long hours. There are tight deadlines, lots of client calls. I can make it work, Michael said quickly. I've been juggling two infants. I know how to manage time. But it was over. He knew it before he stood up to shake the man's hand. That night, he didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stared at his ceiling in the dark, while Emma snored lightly on his chest. He felt invisible, like he was shouting into a world that had already decided he wasn't enough. But then Emma stirred, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger. And he remembered. He wasn't invisible to them. To them, he was everything. By the time morning came, Michael had made a decision. He couldn't rely on the world to give him chance. He'd have to carve out a place for himself, for his children. He still didn't know what that would look like, but one thing was certain. If no one would open a door for him, he'd build one himself. And he'd walk through it, twins in tow. The air inside the apartment was heavy, not with heat or humidity, but with desperation. Michael stood frozen in the baby aisle of a neighborhood grocery store. His hands were clenched around the metal bar of the cart, knuckles white, jaw tight. In the seat of the cart, his son cooed softly, and his daughter, strapped to his chest in a baby carrier, slept soundly, unaware of the weight pressing down on their father's shoulders. The shelf in front of him blurred for a moment as his eyes welled up. Diapers, formula, wipes, three simple items, three absolute necessities. And between all of them, $17.82. Michael slowly pulled his wallet out of his back pocket, opened it, and stared at the crumpled bills inside like they were foreign objects. $12.37. That was all he had until Monday, 4 days away. His eyes flicked back to the shelf. Formula alone was $19.99. A numbness spread across his chest like ice cracking over a frozen lake. "Excuse me, sir," came the voice of Stock Boy as he wheeled a cart behind Michael. But Michael didn't even blink. His thoughts were tangled, racing. This wasn't just about a bill or a bad day. This was him, as a father, failing. In the corner of his mind, he heard the voice of Sophia's mother again, echoing from months ago. He's not capable of raising children. He doesn't come from money. He'll drag you down. Michael swallowed hard. He had fought that voice. Fought it every day since Sophia walked out the door with her designer suitcase and her mother's manipulative words. But now, standing there, unable to afford a can of formula, he wondered, just for a fleeting, shameful second, was she right? His son gave a little hiccup laugh in the cart seat. His daughter shifted slightly in the carrier, her head nudging against his chest. The tiniest sound of trust. That was when Michael lost it. Not with anger, not with rage, but quietly, silently. A single tear slipped down his cheek, then another. He turned his back to the shelf, heart hammering, and crouched by the cart like he was reaching for something, hiding his face from passing strangers. The truth was brutal and inescapable. He couldn't afford the very basics his babies needed to survive. For a long moment, he didn't move, just crouched there, a man on the edge of breaking, buried under the pressure of love and fear. And then it happened. A small hand, warm and trusting, reached out from the cart and wrapped around his thumb. His son's fingers, tiny and curious, gripped him like he was the whole world. Michael stared at that hand, and something in him snapped, not like glass shattering, but like a rope tightening, pulling him back from the edge. He was their world, not their bank account, not their missing mother. Him. He stood up, still blinking back tears, and pulled out his phone. He opened his banking app. Savings? Empty. Credit card? Maxed. But he remembered there was a jar. A stupid mason jar above the fridge labeled change for ice cream. He hadn't touched it in over a year. Maybe there was enough. Without thinking, he grabbed the smallest pack of diapers, the smallest tub of wipes, and a generic can of formula. Something, anything, to stretch the little he had. As he stood in the checkout line, every beep of the scanner felt like thunder in his chest. The total came to $19.65. "I'll be right back," he mumbled to the cashier, cheeks burning. "I have more at home." He left the items with the clerk, sprinted through the parking lot with the twins, strapped them into the car, and raced home. When he got inside, he tore through the kitchen, yanked the jar off the fridge, and dumped its contents onto the table. Quarters, nickels, dimes. A little over $7 in change. Back at the store 15 minutes later, he paid with coins and crumpled bills, avoiding the cashier's gaze. He knew what he looked like. A mess of a man. A walking cautionary tale. But he didn't care. He left with that brown paper bag like it was gold. That night, after changing diapers and singing lullabies and finally getting the twins to sleep, Michael sat at the kitchen table, staring at the receipt. His head throbbed. His heart ached. He was tired of crying, of trying, of pretending like things were okay. But then his daughter stirred in the next room. A soft coo, a snuffling sound, the kind of baby noise that meant everything was still okay in her world. He smiled, because she didn't care about the struggle. She didn't see him as a failure. To her, he was just dad, and that was enough to keep going. Even if the world was stacked against him, even if the nights were long and the help was nowhere, he would keep going. For them. For himself. For a future where this chapter, this lowest point, was just the beginning of a story worth telling. The apartment was silent, save for the soft, rhythmic breathing of the twins. The kind of silence that only came after a storm, after the cries had stopped, after the bottles were emptied, and after exhaustion had won the nightly battle. Michael stood in the dim glow of the kitchen light, his hand wrapped around a chipped mug of black coffee, staring blankly at the worn table in front of him. He hadn't slept more than 3 hours in a row in weeks. The bags under his eyes were as permanent now as his shadow. But it wasn't just the fatigue, it was the feeling of helplessness, of trying and failing and trying again. His bank account had less than $100. His fridge was nearly bare. The rent was due in 10 days. Every breath he took felt like it cost more than he had left. He dropped into the rickety kitchen chair, its creak echoing too loudly in the stillness. His hand trembled as he sipped his coffee, and he winced at the bitterness. There was no milk left, no sugar, just bitter brew and desperate thoughts. He pulled his phone closer and opened the job board again. Same listings, same dismissive rejections. The world wasn't built for single dads, especially ones with newborn twins and no flexible hours. The interviews he landed ended the moment he mentioned childcare. Some employers smiled politely. Others awkwardly changed the subject. The message was always the same. We don't trust you to do both. He ran a hand through his hair and looked toward the nursery. They deserve more. A flicker of frustration lit inside him, but it didn't burn like it used to. This time it sparked something different. He stood and walked over to the living room. On the sofa were the things that had taken over his life. Diapers, pacifiers, wipes, onesies, and the ever-growing pile of baby laundry. He glanced down at a stained onesie, a cheap cotton thing with a slogan printed so poorly it looked like it had been run over. He held it up and scoffed. Who buys this junk? And then, there it was. That flicker again. His mind began racing. What if he could do better? Michael sat back down and grabbed a nearby notebook. He started scribbling thoughts without filtering them. Custom baby clothes, milestone blankets, memory boxes, something personal, something meaningful. He had spent months now immersed in every aspect of baby care. He knew which pacifiers soothed colic, which blankets were softest after 10 washes, which onesies actually held up, and which ones disintegrated in the dryer. He had researched like a scientist, tested like a soldier, failed like a student. But now, maybe all that knowledge meant something. He flipped to a clean page in the notebook and wrote, "Business idea, personalized baby products, designed by a dad, made with love." He stared at the words. They felt foreign and yet, right? The rest of the night passed in a creative frenzy. He pulled out his laptop, still held together by duct tape, and started sketching out ideas. Designs for onesies with baby names printed in soft script, blankets with embroidered birth dates, wooden plaques with first tooth, first step, first word. Michael wasn't a designer. He had no artistic training, but he had something stronger than skill. He had a reason. At 4:13 a.m., his daughter stirred in her crib. Michael rushed to her before she could wake her brother. He picked her up, cradled her gently, and whispered into her hair, "You're the reason, baby girl. You're the reason I'm going to do this." He returned to the desk with her in one arm and the notebook in the other. He scribbled one more line. Name for the business, Little Lion Threads. For the fiercest little hearts. He smiled, his daughter nestled against his chest, the first faint glimmer of purpose settling in his tired bones. For the first time since Sophia walked out that door, Michael didn't feel like a man falling apart. He felt like a man building something. And he was just getting started. The house was still, eerily so. The twins had finally fallen asleep, their rhythmic breathing filling the silence with soft reassurance. Outside, the city was winding down, the occasional honk or siren slicing through the otherwise quiet night. But inside that small apartment, Michael sat hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, bathed in the soft glow of the screen, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. His fingers were stained with fabric paint. His back ached from hours hunched over his makeshift workbench, and his eyes stung from lack of sleep. Before him sat a pile of onesies, his fourth attempt at getting the lettering just right. His earlier designs had been a disaster. Smeared paint, crooked fonts, a fabric medium that bled through the cloth. He had ruined half his supply trying to get it perfect. The kitchen, once a place for family dinners and midnight laughs with Sophia, now looked like a miniature factory. Spools of thread, bottles of paint, fabric scraps, and a shipping scale cluttering every surface. He sighed, sipping a cold cup of coffee that had lost its taste 2 hours ago. Doubt gnawed at him. What was he doing? What made him think he could start a business from scratch with no background, no capital, and 2 infants who needed him more than ever? The logical part of his mind screamed for him to stop, to conserve what little savings he had left. But something deeper pushed him forward. He clicked the refresh button on his website dashboard again. 0. No sales. The same 0 he had seen every time he checked in the past 3 days. Michael leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. He had poured everything into this. His energy, his time, what little money he had. He had created a simple website using a free template, uploaded photos taken in natural light, and even spent an hour writing a heartfelt About Us page that told the story of a father raising twins after being abandoned. He didn't want pity sales. He wanted people to believe in his product. He wanted to earn it. As he prepared to shut his laptop down for the night, his phone buzzed once. Ping. He blinked, not quite registering at first. Then again, ping. He picked up the phone. A notification. His eyes widened. Order number 0001 confirmed. Custom onesie, baby girl, strong like mama, loved by daddy. Michael stared at the screen, his brain momentarily frozen. Someone bought it. Someone bought it. He blinked rapidly, rereading the notification 3 times before the reality began to sink in. He leapt out of the chair, nearly knocking it over, and stared down at his phone with something between disbelief and euphoria. A real person, out there in the world, had stumbled onto his humble little store and chosen one of his designs. And not just any design. It was the one inspired by his own daughter. The one he had spent 3 nights perfecting, trying different fonts, adjusting placement so it looked just right over a newborn's tiny chest. He walked to the nursery and peeked inside. His daughter's hand twitched in her sleep, a little coo escaping her lips. He swallowed the lump rising in his throat. This wasn't just about making money. It wasn't about proving anything to the world. This was for them, for the babies who never asked to be abandoned, for the father who had no choice but to become more than he ever imagined. Michael returned to the kitchen, hands trembling as he carefully packaged the order. He wrapped the onesie in tissue paper, added a handwritten thank you note, and sealed the envelope with care as if it were a precious gift. Because to him it was. Then he did something he hadn't done in weeks. He smiled. A real, honest smile. It wasn't a viral moment. He wasn't an overnight success. But it was the start. One sale. One stranger who believed in him. One step toward the future he was trying so desperately to build. That night, as he lay on the couch, too wired to sleep, too tired to think, he whispered into the dark, "We're going to make it." And for the first time in a long, long time, he believed it. The quiet hum of the baby monitor filled the room, a soft rhythm that had become as familiar to Michael as his own heartbeat. It was past midnight, and the twins were finally asleep, at least for now. Crumbs from a hastily eaten dinner littered the table. Bills lay in a chaotic stack beside a battered laptop, glowing faintly in the dark. And there, seated in the flickering light, was Michael, his fingers stained with fabric paint, his eyes bloodshot but burning with something new. Purpose. He wiped sweat from his brow and carefully examined the latest onesie he had finished. This one had a cartoon rocket ship shooting through a trail of stars, beneath which were the words, "To the moon, little dreamer." It was clean, symmetrical, and, unlike his first dozen attempts, something he could be proud of. Michael grinned to himself. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. He was getting better. This wasn't how he had imagined his life. Not even close. 6 months ago, he was a hopeful father-to-be, a husband making spreadsheets and saving for preschool. Now he was hand-painting onesies in the dead of night, his dreams held together by thread, paint, and the cries of newborns. But for the first time since Sophia walked out, he felt like he was building something, one careful brushstroke at a time. The learning curve had been brutal. The first onesie he tried to sell had looked like a toddler's art project gone wrong. His pricing was off. He had no idea how shipping worked. And an early customer nearly got her order sent to a recycling center because Michael had reused a box that still had an old label on it. He watched YouTube tutorials on heat pressing, read blogs about baby safe ink, and joined online parenting groups under the guise of needing product feedback. The hours were relentless. He'd stay up until 3 or 4 in the morning painting, ironing, wrapping orders, and building his tiny store online. And just when he'd finish, the twins would stir. A diaper blowout here, a fever scare there. It didn't matter how tired he was. He was dad first. Always dad first. The exhaustion was like a second skin. And yet, amid the chaos, he had found something he didn't know he needed: control. His life had been torn apart, but with every order, every new design, he was reclaiming a piece of it, rebuilding one pixelated upload and customer message at a time. Word started spreading. A woman from his old apartment complex placed an order and posted a glowing review on Facebook. Then a mother from the local Mommy and Me group shared photos of her baby in one of Michael's custom onesies. Orders trickled in, not dozens, but enough to keep his momentum, enough to keep the lights on. He got better at marketing too. He learned the magic of hashtags. He shot product photos during nap time, using a blanket, a lamp, and one of the twins' teddy bears for scale. He created templates for invoices and began personalizing thank you notes with every package he shipped. His thank you cards always ended the same way. From one parent to another: "Thank you for supporting my family." It was honest, raw. People responded to that. Still, there were hard days. A supplier sent a batch of onesies with a fabric defect that only showed up after washing. Michael had to refund nearly a dozen orders, losing money he couldn't afford to lose. One night, he was up redoing orders until dawn, eyes stinging, head pounding, while the twins wailed from the nursery. But he never gave up. He couldn't afford to, not just financially, but emotionally. Because with every small win, every order confirmation, he could feel himself rising from the ashes of what Sophia left behind. This business wasn't just about income. It was about identity. It was about showing his children that he hadn't crumbled, that he refused to, that he had become more. One Saturday, a woman messaged him on Instagram. She ran a blog for new parents and had come across his store. She loved his message, the authenticity, the craftsmanship. Could she feature him? Michael stared at the screen in disbelief. He said yes. A week later, the blog post went live. It was titled From Single Dad to Startup: How Love Became a Brand. The story was raw. It mentioned the twins, the heartbreak, the long nights. It wasn't just a product post, it was a portrait of his resilience. The response was immediate. Dozens of new followers, a flood of kind messages, and then something he never expected: his first bulk order from a boutique in Seattle. He cried in the kitchen when he read the email. Not because of the money, not even because of the opportunity, but because it was working. He was working. He was enough. That night, with the twins asleep, he sat in the nursery holding both of them in his arms. The glow from the hallway light painted golden halos on their tiny heads. He whispered to them, a promise in every word. This isn't just about survival anymore. We're going to build something beautiful, you and me. And as he kissed their foreheads, he didn't feel like a man abandoned anymore. He felt like a man reborn. The nights blurred into mornings and mornings into afternoons, but Michael kept moving, bone-tired, yes, but powered by a quiet, blazing determination. His apartment was no longer just a home. It had become a nursery, a studio, a warehouse, and a war room for survival. After the twins had gone down for their midday nap, Michael would tiptoe into the living room, his little sanctuary of productivity. On the small folding table sat the tools of his newfound trade: stacks of blank onesies, rolls of soft fabric, ink pads, sketchbooks, and a second-hand sewing machine that coughed to life like an old man stretching in the cold. Each piece he created carried more than thread and ink. It carried heart. The designs weren't flashy, but they were full of love. A baby blanket that read "Snuggled in Daddy's Strength," a onesie with "Born into Resilience" in delicate script, milestone cards etched with affirmations. He wasn't just selling baby items. He was telling his story one stitch at a time. But success wasn't romantic. For every sale he made, there were 5 nights of no sleep. Every joyful customer message was preceded by a moment of doubt. He constantly worried. Was the design too plain? Was the packaging cheap? Did the colors pop enough on camera? The weight of being a one-man team, father, creator, marketer, shipper, was crushing. But the moments that counted, they kept him going. One day, after tucking the twins into their stroller for a walk to the park, Michael checked his email. A message blinked at the top of the screen with the subject, "Boutique Collaboration Opportunity." He stopped walking, heart suddenly loud in his ears. The email came from a woman named Emily, owner of Little Roots Baby Boutique, a trendy independent store that specialized in handcrafted, ethically made baby products. She had stumbled across his online store through an Instagram repost from one of her customers. "Your story is moving, and your designs carry something rare, soul," she wrote. "I'd love to discuss a possible wholesale partnership." Michael reread the message 3 times before realizing he had stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, the twins cooing beneath the shade of their stroller canopy, the world around him continuing on. He crouched beside them, kissed each tiny forehead, and whispered, "We're getting there, little warriors." That night, once the twins were asleep, Michael sat in front of his laptop and drafted his reply with the same care he put into his products. He told Emily his story, not the polished version, but the real one. He told her he wasn't just building a business. He was building a life, a promise to 2 innocent souls that they'd never have to feel like something was missing. They set up a call. Emily was warm, professional, and genuine. She didn't just want to carry his products. She wanted to feature him as part of a Fathers Who Build series her boutique was running. She loved his message, his mission, and most of all, his refusal to quit. Michael's products were soon featured in a curated Father's Day window display, complete with a large sign, "Built with Love," the story behind Michael's baby company. Sales spiked. Word spread. Parents emailed him with words of support, some sharing their own stories of abandonment, resilience, or solo parenting. They didn't just want his products, they believed in him. For the first time in months, the fear of not being enough began to fade. But even as his small business grew, Michael never let go of his core truth. His children came first. If an order took longer because one of the twins had a fever, so be it. If he had to miss a call to change a diaper, he'd reschedule. This wasn't a startup built for investors or viral fame. It was built for survival, for love, for legacy. One Saturday afternoon, Michael took the twins to the local park. He sat on a bench watching them play in the grass, their laughter high and light like wind chimes in the breeze. A couple nearby whispered, "Isn't that the dad from the baby store online?" Michael smiled to himself, not out of vanity, but out of quiet gratitude. Recognition meant reach, and reach meant security for his children. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in molten gold and soft lavender, Michael looked at his kids, at how far they had come, at how far he had come. The man Sophia left behind, the one who cried on the nursery floor believing he wasn't enough, had become something else entirely. He was no longer just surviving. He was rising, and the world was starting to take notice. The morning began like any other. The twins were crawling across the living room floor, one chasing a plush giraffe, the other babbling at the ceiling fan. Michael, bleary-eyed but fueled by habit, brewed coffee and answered customer emails on his laptop, pausing every so often to wipe pureed banana off his shirt or retrieve a pacifier. Then his phone buzzed, a new email notification. Subject: Story opportunity from Channel 4 News. He blinked twice, assuming it was spam. But when he opened the message, his hands froze above the keyboard. "Hi, Michael. We came across your baby brand Little Steps by Dad on Instagram and were moved by your story. A single father building a business from nothing while raising newborn twins. This is the kind of inspiring content our audience loves. We'd love to do a short feature on your journey. Would you be available for a quick interview this week?" Michael read it again and again. He stared at the screen as his heart pounded in his chest. They wanted to tell his story. His. He hesitated. Part of him didn't want the attention. He was used to working in silence, to letting the victories be quiet. But then he looked down at his children, his daughter now chewing on a teething ring, his son smacking his hands against the hardwood in triumphant delight. This wasn't just his story anymore. It was theirs. He typed back a shaky reply. "Yes, I'd be honored. When and where?" The interview took place 2 days later in the tiny apartment that now doubled as a nursery, workshop, and fulfillment center. Michael scrubbed every surface, neatly stacked boxes of onesies in the background, and even managed to find a shirt that didn't have some trace of baby spit up. The news anchor, a bright-eyed young woman named Clara, was warm and disarming. "So," she asked as the camera rolled, "you started all of this after your wife left?" Michael hesitated just for a moment. He could feel the heat of the lights, the weight of the moment pressing on his chest. "She didn't just leave me," he said slowly. "She left us, me and our twins. I was alone. I was scared. I didn't know how I'd get through the next week, let alone build a life for my kids. But every time I looked at them, I knew giving up wasn't an option." The interviewer nodded, visibly moved. "And how did the business begin?" Michael smiled slightly. "Out of desperation, honestly. I couldn't find a job that would let me be the father I needed to be. So I created one. I made my first onesie on the floor with cheap paint and shaky hands. It was terrible," he laughed, "but it was a start." The segment showed clips of him at work, pressing designs on a fabric, packaging orders, juggling bottles and burp cloths while answering emails. The twins cooed and crawled into the frame, stealing the show. The final shot was of Michael holding both children in his arms, smiling down at them as he said softly to the camera, "I didn't build this brand to get rich. I built it so I could be there, so I could be a father fully. And I hope other dads out there know that it's okay to struggle, as long as you keep going." The segment aired that Friday evening. Michael didn't even watch it live. He was too busy giving the twins their bath, chasing bubbles and giggles. But his phone? It didn't stop buzzing. By the time he checked it, his inbox was overflowing. Hundreds of new orders. Dozens of messages from other single parents thanking him for sharing his story. Requests for collaborations. A message from a boutique in San Diego asking to stock his products. But amid all the celebration was one message that stopped him cold. Sophia. Michael, I just saw the news story. I, I don't even know what to say. You're doing so well. They're beautiful. Can we talk? Please. I'm sorry. He stared at the message for a long time. And then another notification came through, this time a photo, sent by one of Sophia's cousins, someone who had always liked Michael more than they liked her. The image showed Sophia's mother, eyes narrow and face twisted in displeasure, watching the segment in a luxury living room with a glass of red wine trembling in her hand. Michael let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. So they saw it. They saw what he had become. Not a failure, not a Kustov. A father, a provider, a man who didn't break when life tried to shatter him. He put the phone down, walked into the nursery, and found his twins sound asleep, his daughter clutching the ear of a stuffed elephant, his son snoring softly. Michael leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, smile tugging at his lips. Tomorrow, he would reply to Sophia. But tonight, he would just breathe. Because for the first time in a long time, he was proud of the man in the mirror. The cafe was warm and quiet, too quiet for Michael's racing thoughts. The low hum of conversation, the clinking of coffee cups, the occasional hiss of milk frothing, none of it reached him. His mind was a tornado of memories, possibilities, and the image of Sophia standing in the doorway all those months ago with her suitcase in hand and her heart somewhere else. She was late. He tapped his fingers on the rim of his mug, the ceramic warm but not comforting. His kids were home with Mrs. Ellison, their retired neighbor who had become something of a grandmother figure since Sophia left. She adored the twins. She knew what today meant. Take your time, she had said with a reassuring squeeze of his arm. Closure doesn't come often, and when it does, it's best to meet it with a clear head. Michael wasn't sure his head would ever be clear again when it came to Sophia. The bell above the cafe door jingled. He looked up. There she was. Sophia walked in slowly, like someone unsure of the ground beneath her feet. Her once confident stride was replaced by a hesitant shuffle. The woman who had once turned heads with effortless poise now looked smaller, fragile even. She wore a cream-colored coat cinched at the waist, her hair swept into a messy bun, face devoid of the high-end makeup she used to wear like armor. When their eyes met, she froze for a second, just long enough for Michael to see it. Regret. Hey, she said softly, sliding into the seat across from him. Hey, he replied, flat but not unkind. They sat there for a beat, silence folding between them like an old blanket no one wanted to shake out. Finally, Sophia exhaled. I saw the news piece. You and the twins, you looked happy. Michael gave a slow nod. We are. It wasn't a dig, just truth. Her eyes flicked down to the table, hands fumbling with the corner of a napkin. I didn't expect it to hit me so hard. Seeing them, seeing you. You didn't think we'd make it without you? He asked, tone neutral but eyes sharp. Her mouth opened to respond, then closed again. Michael waited. I made a mistake, she said finally. A huge one, and I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I want to try. I want to be part of their lives again. Yours too, maybe, if there's room for forgiveness. Forgiveness. It hung in the air like an open wound. Michael leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. You want to talk about forgiveness? You left, walked out when they were just weeks old. You didn't even look back. I know, she whispered, tears building in her eyes. My daughter cried for hours every night for weeks. My son wouldn't sleep unless he was on my chest. I had no money, no help, no clue what I was doing, but I did it. I stayed. I didn't run. His voice was steady but laced with heat. Not anger, truth. Sophia nodded, blinking fast. One tear escaped, tracing a line down her cheek. My mother, she told me I was ruining my life staying with you. that I'd never have a future. She said I needed to choose between comfort and chaos, and that you were chaos. Michael laughed, one bitter, hollow sound. Yeah, well, the chaos built a brand. Paid rent, fed our kids, made sure they never knew what abandonment felt like, even though I was drowning half the time. Sophia bit her lip. I'm not asking to come back and pick up where we left off. I want to know my children. I want to try. Please. Michael stared at her, the woman he once would have moved mountains for. But he wasn't that man anymore. I'm not going to stop you from seeing them, he said at last. They deserve to know who their mother is. But don't expect it to be easy. This isn't your redemption arc. This is their life, and you're asking to be a part of it again. You'll earn that, if they let you. Sophia looked like she might shatter right there in the chair, but she nodded. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. And Sophia, he added, his voice gentler now, but firm, don't mistake survival for forgiveness. I moved on. I had to. For them. And for me. She nodded again, slower this time. I understand. Michael finished his coffee in silence and stood. He reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph, one he had taken just last week. The twins grinning in matching onesies, paint on their hands after a messy art session. He placed it on the table and slid it toward her. That's who you're fighting to be part of now. Sophia held the photo like it might disappear if she blinked too long. Michael turned to leave. Michael, she called out softly. He looked back. I'm proud of you. He smiled faintly, then walked out of the cafe into the cold afternoon air. Outside, the wind cut across his face, but he welcomed it. Every step away from that table felt lighter, more grounded, more whole. He wasn't the man she had left. He was better, stronger, a father forged in fire, who built a life from nothing, not just for survival, but for joy. And as he walked toward home, where his twins would be waiting, giggling, calling for him, he knew something with absolute certainty. He didn't need a partner to thrive. He already had everything worth fighting for.